Lions Rock Productions.
This is Jay Moore.
This is Greg Cruz.
This is Bryce Vine.
This is Dexter from The Offspring.
This is Nathan
This
East.
is Sebastian Younger.
This is Daryl Ames.
This is Stuart Copeland.
This is Mick Gillette.
This is Andy Summers.
This is Dr. Bob Greenberg.
This is Gabby Reese.
This is Rob Bell.
Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero.
Hey, and this is Pete A. Turner.
This is Dr. Bob Greenberg.
This is Cole Cuchna.
And you're listening to the Break It Down Show.
And now, the Break It Down Show with John Leon Guerrero and Pete A. Turner.
The great music of Dmitri Shostakovich. You gave historical perspective. You talked about his relationship as a Russian to the people around him and to the government of the USSR. Then you had pieces of music that were introduced in your lecture and then played in full. And that was a spectacular experience on a Saturday morning. And my observation was, first of all, that the Herbst Theater, how many people is that theater hold?
I think 1,100, including the balcony.
Yeah, Pete and I were talking about how it was right there at the 1,000 mark somewhere. But these people came out to a cultural event at the Opera House at 10 o'clock on a Saturday morning. And that's kind of odd. I'll tell you, it worked out beautifully for myself and my wife. Number one, because we drove straight fucking there without a moment of traffic. We had time to grab a nice cappuccino ahead of time and warm into the experience and then enjoy the experience to its fullest. And we were in the city for lunch on a Saturday. So it's really brilliant timing. But you don't think about Saturday at 10 a.m. as a time to get cultured this way. And since one of the four of us has most recently had this experience of figuring out how to obtain some patronage for this capturing of an art, I want to talk about that. First of all, Dr. Bob, how in the hell do you get that thing funded?
Something like that is funded like all of the programs. This is the organization that runs this program is San Francisco Performances. And the organization is about 35 years old. It was founded by a brilliant woman named Ruth Felt. And the way she funded it initially and continued to fund it until she retired 3 years ago is to cultivate a very wealthy board of directors, cultivate all the big money that's here in town. And luckily, San Francisco has a lot of big money and a good degree of philanthropy. It's not like, God bless us, it's not like Dallas, for example, where the philanthropy is just unfreaking believable. But there's a lot of old money in San Francisco. So it means cultivating individuals, creating a very effective board of directors that can then also cultivate their friends. So it comes from private donations, is what it comes from.
Wow.
There are some grantors out there. I mean, there's the Hewlett Foundation and there's the California State Arts Foundation. There used to be the National Endowment of the Arts, although that's been savaged, unfortunately. But for the most part, this is private money that keeps an organization like this alive, a nonprofit organization like this alive. So what she would have done when we created this program back in '92 is she would have talked to her board and said, listen, we want to start a new program on Saturday mornings. Experiment. People can come in their street clothes. It'll combine talk and performance. It was me and the Alexander String Quartet, who you heard perform yesterday.
Brilliantly.
A brilliant group. I mean, first class. As I've said before, we've been working together since the '80s. Because I've been composing for them. I've composed 4 string quartets for them and a piano quintet and a bevy of other pieces. So it's a very long-term relationship. Anyway, Ruth would have said to her board, I want to do this. I want to experiment and see if we can do an off-hours program where people can just come in their street clothes and get a little talk and a little music. And she would have said, I'm budgeting $40,000 this season for it. Who's gonna deliver?
Anybody?
Raise your hands. And who do you know who's going to deliver for this? That's what she would have done. Yesterday afterwards, the reason why I couldn't join you afterwards, as you know, is because we had a little affair with the donors, with about 40 people, who are the people that are currently supporting the program.
Right.
And they all deserve a little thank you and a little flesh to
Absolutely.
Flesh. It's a very noble thing. So that's how you do it in an organization like that. It's very personal and it's very, it's very local.
Right. Well, I'm sorry you couldn't join us afterwards. I mean, we really wanted to see you, of course, as we always do, but you did have very important things to do. we went to the Hustler Club and did a bump out of a stripper's belly button, which I know you would have enjoyed. But that may or may not make it into the show.
With your wife.
Right. Oh, she can bump with the best of them, baby. The philanthropic piece of that story is one that has really funded symphonies around the country for a long time. And I don't tend to be, I'm not a trickle-down guy. I don't believe in the data. But here's where it absolutely does work out, and where I am happy that people like Alfred P. Sloan made $1 jillion, because his foundation, 40 years after his passing, is still funding things that are important to the arts, if not the most newly entertaining or novel pieces that people are, striving to grab at. Cole, however, has managed to figure out how to make something that's consumable by the masses today, that is, that converts into a few bucks. And so a tip of the cap, Cole, for being able to touch a nerve that way. Because really what you're doing is something very similar to, like you've said, something very similar to the thing that Dr. Bob does, which is allow us to understand and appreciate and enjoy music a little more. But you got Spotify to pay you a few bucks to do that.
Yeah. My story is pretty unique, though. That's not how
it's not a recipe.
Yeah.
It's not a recipe. Yeah. It's a home run. You ran into a fastball.
It was a lot of luck. I mean, I put myself in a position to have luck, but
you still have to swing the bat to run into a fastball.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the funding thing's interesting, because people are willing to pay for quality, and you see that now. At least I see it now. Like, if you guys are familiar with Patreon, which is providing creators of all kinds a livelihood. I was using Patreon before Spotify came around, and then given a couple more seasons, I probably could have got to a place where I could have done it full time. But there's intellectuals that are just giving lectures, that have podcasts, that are making tens of $1,000s a month simply through Patreon. And podcasts are kind of the space where I think a lot of the intellectual presentations are being able to play out. Which is why I really love the podcasting medium, because people are going to this space to consume long form, deep dive, intellectual, really heady stuff. If you look at the top podcast list, it's like TED Talks and Joe Rogan, who's pretty fascinating guy. It's all these like people that are just interested in learning and having meaningful conversations, and they're willing to pay for it, whether they're supporting the person on Patreon or as someone in my position. Like, what I love about podcasting is that it's creating this community that is really based on learning and pursuing like intellectual discussions. Like, people listen to this, it's like they're going to listen to an hour and a half, 2 hour conversation. That's it.
Yeah.
But and there wasn't really a medium before that, and that's what's really fascinating about your work with the great courses, is it was kind of a podcast before podcasts were a thing. It was downloadable, on demand. You had to pay for it up front, but now you can do it for free with just through advertising. Actually, since I have you ever considered doing a podcast?
I would do it in half a heartbeat if I if I felt that I could. I vlog. It's not quite a podcast, but and I do blog every week.
Yeah.
I write a 1,100 word piece every week, as you guys know, the Music History Monday. But I should be doing that, shouldn't I?
Yes. You can even just read those blog posts out loud. Even you see a lot of people in journalism now on websites. You'll have the story, but then you can click play on an audio of the same piece, and essentially you can turn what you're already doing into a podcast, and even you get more listeners and potentially monetize it if you're interested.
Well, let me ask you some questions, because we're going to do a little business here.
Yeah, right.
When Jack created Patreon, I met him.
Do you know Jack?
I do.
Oh, okay.
I do.
Is he from around here?
We have yet to have Jack on the show.
He's a super guy.
Well, we've been trying to hunt him down. We had Natalie on the show, and she's amazing. But Jack,
a visionary, and
truly
a very nice guy, and off there, we'll talk about contact info, because I can share that with you if you want to. Mm-hmm. And I signed up early and never used it. Because the question I want to ask you, because this is where my roadblock came, is, you need to offer your donors some sort of extra something above and beyond. What did you offer your subscribers?
Well, I'll say
pictures of himself with his shirt off.
Yeah, because everyone wants to see that. Well, 120 pounds of me. No, well, one, I would say you don't actually have to do anything if you don't want. You would be surprised. The people want to pay you because they appreciate what you're already doing. You would be surprised how many people, like I, for one, would 100% do it. I support people on Patreon personally that don't offer me any extra content, or if they do, I don't even pay attention to it. I just feel good. I think people just feel good about supporting the things that they really, really enjoy. But, I did do a few things. Mostly the community, I would say, is all you would really need to do. People want to feel a little bit more involved in you personally. So I did Patreon Q&As, so they would just write their questions for me, and then I would film a video answering their questions. So pretty simple things, but I think they really were appreciated because, they get to ask me directly things that they were always curious about. I did some merchandise, some pins and fun things like that, and like just little things here or there, but I honestly didn't do all that much because it's just a lot of work. You know how to even just do one extra episode for them would just be a lot of work. So I think you can get creative with it and find ways where I think it's more about interacting rather than just providing more content. If you're already providing the content, they appreciate that. That's why they support you. Now Patreon's a great way to actually start to directly involve them.
I want to jump in and illustrate to a point. You said it's a lot of work. That really isn't good enough, because someone 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years from now can hear that and think, oh, well, he was just lazy. No. It's like, it's hours and hours and hours and hours. And if you're going to get $150 back, not that that's great, but it's hard to justify 20 hours of work. And I don't know how long it takes you to do an episode. It takes us 10. Yeah. So I mean, it's just it is a lot of work, but it's more than just a lot of work. You can't justify that amount of work for a small amount of money. You should put your money and effort into something else potentially.
Well, and it depends where you get with the Patreon. If that's going to be your the way you get income, then obviously you're going to give it more of your time. But if it's kind of a supplementary thing, I think it's pretty flexible in what you want to do. If people aren't happy with what they're getting in return, they can stop at any time. That's the great part. Like, I never felt an obligation because I was pretty upfront of like, here's what you're going to get. You can support it or not. I mean, my Patreon's down now because of Spotify, but had I continued on the path I was going, it was a really cool thing. And I think, especially with someone like you with the built-in audience already, I think it could be utilized.
And we won't talk business much longer, but first to address what Pete said. This is the problem of being self-employed, is that you can never say no. You can never say too much work because you never know what it might lead to.
Yeah.
Right.
So cold busted butt, but look what it led to. It's because you created quality and consistent quality. And it meant that, in your case, a rare case, admittedly, but we're all hoping for the ring at the end. You were rewarded, and you are being rewarded for your hard and good work. Mm-hmm. And that would never have happened had you not blindly invested the time up front.
Yep.
And the same thing is true with me. What brought me to the attention of Tom Rollins, who founded the great courses of the teaching company, was these endless adult education courses I taught 4 nights a week. And that was after teaching 4 days a week.
Wow.
And then all weekend prepping. And I had 2 small kids, and I had no life of my own. And yet my reward was something I could never have anticipated.
Yeah.
Right.
This guy calling me one day in 1992 and saying, "You're it."
You're the guy.
And so if you're self-employed, it just means constantly taking risks and constantly spending more money and spending less time with your kids and less time out and less time exercising and not living your life because you're always trying to. But if you don't do that, you're never in control of your life.
Right.
Yeah.
And so so back to what you're talking about, I would be very easy, for example, for me now to podcast, to record my Music History Mondays. I have to say those vlogs that I've started doing, they were all, the great courses asked me to do all of that to increase my sales. But I'm not seeing $10,000 a month increase in sales.
Yeah.
Am I using my time wisely enough? This is something I'm constantly asking myself.
Yeah.
Because now that you can buy my courses from my website.
Yeah, that's great.
For download, it's great, but how do you get out there?
Yeah.
And if people are used to getting everything for free, well, why should we?
Yeah.
I have to supply something extra, but that supplying something extra is another day's work.
Well, let me say this in your behalf then, because you do the Alexander String Quartet sessions here in San Francisco, but you also do in Phoenix a similar thing.
Yeah.
And if you're in those two cities and you don't go consume this, you're just fucking crazy. Because watching that for the amount of money, and it's very reasonable.
Pete's talking to you, listener.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you live in the San Francisco Bay Area or in the greater Phoenix area and you're not consuming these lectures, this content that Dr. Bob is bringing with the help of brilliant musicians, you're really missing out.
Yeah, Phoenix Symphony. Now, these lectures I do in Phoenix, they're self-standing, but they're in conjunction with the Phoenix Symphony.
Sure.
Okay.
First-rate organization. And the place where I do the lectures is one of the most amazing places in the world. And did I tell you guys about this place?
Yeah, you started to off mic before.
Yeah, the Musical Instrument Museum. Who would know that one of the greatest musical instrument museums in existence
is in Phoenix.
Is in Phoenix. The Target, the guy who founded Target, built this museum and installed this collection, and it's crazy fantastic.
Pete, that might be where we interview George Benson.
Sorry. Well, I would love to get George Benson. Let's go do it. Let's go to Phoenix. Yeah.
You mean like from Breezen, George Benson?
Yeah, we've already got him to say yes. It's just been a matter of getting him and us in the same room.
Wow. We did Breezen. I was in maybe Mr. Benson shouldn't hear this, but I was in the like everyone else in the mid-'70s. I was in a disco band,
right?
And we wore matching leisure suits and the whole freaking bit.
Mike came in for a photo.
I still have the shirt downstairs, the silk shirt.
It fits well?
No, it would fit him. I weighed 145 pounds back then. Now at 195, it's going to go over like one shoulder. But Breezen was, no matter what kind of band you had to play Breezen. You just had to play it. Everyone wanted to hear Breezen.
Yeah. As a drummer, here's what drummers struggle with Breezen. Do I play those 16th notes with one hand on the hi-hat, or do I two-hand it? Because it changes the way you approach the whole song. And the answer to that question is you play it with one hand. But that's, every beginning drummer who's exposed to Breezen has to deal with that before they can move on. You know what? This has been a tremendous week for Pete and for me. We've been fans of Cole's show from the very beginning, so we watched the show take off into the stratosphere in the launch of Season 3 and Frank Ocean, which, is enormous. We've gotten to hang out with Dr. Bob and see his lecture work. And we were earlier this week, actually that was the end of last week, we were at Roland for their Totally Drums event, the launch of their new version of the V-Drums, and there were a lot of drummers in the house, and along with a lot of drummers, just a lot of Roland artists. So I had the pleasure of seeing Rick Murata again, who I love, so I always enjoy running into him. But this week I also met Jimmy Jam and Ray Parker Jr. Everybody knows Ray Parker Jr. for Ghostbusters.
Oh, yeah.
People don't realize that, I should say, only those who know realize that he's a monster on the guitar and a tremendous jazz player and a tremendous everything player. So this week, it's Sunday now, and you guys are closing up what has been a huge week for me to have the privilege of putting the two of you together, first of all, and then to hear your perspectives on these topics, each of you. Thank you very much for that. And I want to ask Cole first. What would you like to see Dr. Bob, as a consumer of Dr. Bob's material, what would you like to see him do in the next year or two?
It's interesting.
I got a question for you too, Dr. Bob, but Cole goes first.
No, well, the first thing that comes to mind, and this is totally selfish, but it's kind of, that's what the question is. So what would I do with Dr. Rob the robot? I mean, it would be cool to one day hear your like an analysis of contemporary work. That would be kind of what I would be curious about, whether that's, and maybe outside of classical or art music would be interesting for me. But obviously I'm very skewed biased towards that subject, but I just think it'd be cool to hear your mind kind of, analyze.
Wrap around some contemporary work.
I think that'd be really interesting.
I think I would disappoint the living daylights out of it.
Yeah,
I do. Listen, I've listened to your show, and I've listened to your interview with these guys. The whole world of sampling, of the layering techniques, and this is utterly foreign to me.
Yeah.
And the first thing you need to know before you do a freaking thing, before you say a freaking word about anything, you've got to know the repertoire.
Yeah.
You've just got to know what's out there. You've got to know who's who, who's making what choices, how the technology allows them to do this. You got to have all the
chain of influences.
You got to have the technical chops, and you have to know the repertoire. I have neither. So I would merely be reacting based on what I know in my world, and I would be reacting out of ignorance and not out of strength. And I try, at my age now, when I was young and stupid, I put myself in all sorts of positions I shouldn't have been in. But at 64, I have learned to keep my trap shut when I'm in a place that I don't know about. What's a famous line? It's better to be quiet and thought an idiot than to open your mouth and prove it.
Remove all doubt.
Exactly.
But I'm gonna push back now, because that's what I do, and I'm gonna say this: if you were to take Warren Zevon's last album that he made while he had cancer, or David Bowie's last album when he had cancer, you know that muse. You know that kind of music, and you could go in and do what you do and blow our minds. And you may not have it, but I have every bit of faith that you could take those works and give us something that was
David
worth a lot
Bowie.
of money.
I probably could.
Yeah.
But we're talking about the world of hip hop,
contemporary
the world
music.
of electronics.
This is 2 years ago. It's contemporary. It would count.
It is, but I stand in awe of what's being done technologically.
Sure. For sure.
In terms of this entire, it's utterly foreign to me. Now,
what I heard you say was you're going to do David Bowie.
Well, I would be willing to listen and try.
That's what Angie Bowie heard Mick Jagger say too. Anyway.
Okay, back to the belly button.
Sorry, excuse me, dude. I appreciate that comment and the humility behind that comment, but I think what Cole's after and what would fascinate me as well about that idea, the notion that you would take apart something contemporary, it isn't necessarily the technical piece as much, or the instrumentation and the technique behind the production, but the parts that you do know, which is the history and humanity and emotion that goes into a piece of work.
Here's the circumstance under which I would do such a thing. I would do such a thing in order to find links to the music I know. For example, Igor Stravinsky used to talk about his works as assemblages. He didn't call them compositions. He says, I make assemblages. And he would create these little blocks of sound that could be superimposed, juxtaposed, all kinds of things. Now, that's a process not unlike what we're talking about now. Edgar Varese, who in the late 40s and early 50s started using this Ampex tape machine to create something called musique concrète. That is, he'd record sounds, and then he'd splice and dice and superimpose and create these extraordinary soundscapes. I would, if I had to do this, if I'm, for example, if we're working with the kind of hip hop we're talking that I've heard on your show, what I would do is try to put that within the context of the music with which I am familiar, and give it a historical context. Because whether these electronic people today know it or not, they're doing stuff that's been done before.
You did it yesterday.
Under other circumstances.
When you're talking about Dimitri's music, because we go way back, me and Dimitri. But he was sampling. You said, like, here is Moonlight Sonata.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. Yes.
He was sampling. And you absolutely could compare and contrast those techniques.
So that's something I could do. And that's something I would do, providing that everyone understood that I was not saying that I know what I'm talking about, and that I'm not declaring myself an expert on this music, which obviously I'm not. So as long as we went in with those understandings, then I'd be okay with that, because it would be an interesting exercise.
Yeah.
But you have to respect expertise. You have to respect the people who spend their lives thinking about this music and listening to it. And I do respect it. And I know where my limits are. And I think it's important for all of us. Yeah. We don't want to superimpose limits on ourselves that don't exist, but we never want to be jerks either. And I have to say, we've all run into a lot of jerks who think they know, because they know one thing, they think they know everything. And it ain't the fact.
Yeah.
Well, and that brings me to the topic of Cole Cuchna. Dr. Bob, seeing the effect of Cole's work and the response that he gets and the amount of passion that people have answered Cole's work with, what do you think is the logical path that Cole should take the more desirous literate listener?
This episode of the Break It Down Show is brought to you by Lions Rock Productions.
That's us.
We publish, evaluate, and develop podcasts just like this one, consult others to build their own, and create associated content and content marketing strategies.
So if you're launching or expanding your social media presence, your business or your personal brand, or if you just want to take your media presence to the next level,
reach out to us on Twitter
at Pete A. Turner
or at JohnLG69
at the Break It Down Show.
There's 1,000 ways to get a hold of us.
Now enjoy the show.
The person who wants to appreciate, understand, and further enjoy music and sees Cole as their pathway to that. What do you think? Because I think those listeners are listening to this show. What do you think it is that you'd like for them to look for in music as their tastes mature?
I think what Cole said before about what I was able to offer him is, as far as we need go. Listen, don't you love being talked about in third person? It's actually,
he's sitting right here, man.
It's actually a Jewish tense. It's called third person invisible. Would someone tell your brother if he doesn't finish his broccoli, he's going to wear it? That's third person invisible.
That's third and fourth, because you're asking for someone.
No, it's third person invisible. My mother was a master of that. She was also master of first person command. You'll pass the ketchup. Not please. You'll pass me the ketchup. She once did this, by the way.
Wow.
My elder kids, who are now 32 and 29, were little ones, 4 and 5, whatever their ages were. And she says, "You'll pass the ketchup." I said, "Mom, what's the magic word?" Because I'm thinking, they need to learn. I say, "Mom, what's the magic word?" And she looks at me and she says, "Now."
And you got to passing, didn't you?
Tough chick. Anyway.
I think I'm asking you to highlight Cole's responsibility to the universe.
Well,
now
Cole
that he's
has
taken up this mantle.
Cole has no responsibility to the universe up and beyond what you're already doing, and that is dealing with the music you love, and dealing with the musicians who you respect, and opening them up to kind of divine influence, and allowing other listeners to hear them with new ears and increased comprehending. If you continue on this path, sooner or later, as your vocabulary widens and as your interests grow, because that's what always happens. We just okay, stuff that used to satisfy me. I mean, my background is as a jazz pianist, and that's how I made a living for a long time. I mean, it's not that I didn't play my Bach and Beethoven and Mozart when I was a kid, but when I was a teenager and a young adult, I made my living playing jazz piano.
He's just trying to distract us so we don't demand that he show us that leisure suit.
I'll show you pictures. And I'm a good jazz pianist, and I was even working in New York. It stopped satisfying me. I got to a point where it's a hard world, first of all. Yeah. It's a very hard world.
You said that.
And it was a hard world when I was doing it in the mid-'70s. And more I was attracted to composing and to the world of art music.
Yeah.
And this becomes an inevitable thing. None of us can stand still. We all need to grow all the time. So you'll find your growth direction. It's inevitable. And wherever that direction is, You're a good teacher. You're going to draw people with you. And that's all we have to do. That's all, our only responsibility is to be honest with ourselves, talk about what we love, and teach well. You know, show that love, show that enthusiasm, and bring it to the people who are listening to it. And so I have no advice except keep doing exactly what you're doing.
Yeah, I think you said honesty, and that's like really where I found, because I tried a number of things in my life and tried to be successful at them, most of them failures, which, you know, is a pretty common thread with all successful people, I feel like.
And everybody at this table.
Yeah. But I feel like once I got to a place of honesty where I was doing things not to get attention, that's when the actual real attention came. Mm-hmm. I think part of all successful people is they find this place where they are doing honest work. They're doing true work, authentic work, where it is mostly about the work itself and not the things that come with it. So I appreciate that sentiment for sure. And I mean, I feel comfortable going forward knowing that that's kind of my North Star is the honesty, and just staying true to myself and presenting the work with honesty. If it flops, it flops, but it's, you know, that's the great part about doing things with authenticity and honesty as your primary motivation, because whatever you put into the world, there's no failure, you know, at that point. It's the process, the authenticity of the process is the success, to me at least. So knowing that now, like, I'm pretty comfortable going forward.
And what you also have going for you, and this is important for all of us, you know, when we're 20, we all want to be a success, or 21 or 22, but you know what? It's not our time. You still have to accumulate life experience. You still have to fail. You still have to learn what your priorities are. Okay, but by your mid-30s, you're a dad, you're a husband, you got real life responsibilities. The whole world starts to change. And people will accept. Yesterday, at this donor gathering, I was asked to describe next year's program for our Saturday mornings.
Oh, just you wait, listeners.
And I was just, well, okay, Robert Schumann was a habitual masturbator, and we know that from his diaries. And I made some bad joke about hairy palms. Now, all these rich people laughed heartily. If I had tried that joke when I was 30, it would have fallen dead. But you see, I've got cred now. I've got street cred because I've been doing what I'm doing long enough, and they expect a certain sassiness from me, and we were in a private setting. And the same is true with you. You've got your cred now. You've built it up over time. That's the other thing we get with age and with time. The longer we do something, the better we get at it, the more credible we become. And it's what you were talking about, authenticity. Yeah. Authenticity only comes with failure and experience. Yeah. That's it. Competence cannot be taught. You learn it yourself over time. You guys, you saw what I think about you as interviewers, as podcast people, beyond competent. Okay? Total competence. But that doesn't happen by itself. It only happens with life and experience. And that's one of the really glorious things about getting older. Our knees go, our hair goes, our eyes go. But if we're smart, we become wiser and all the time more competent.
And licensed to beat off a lot.
You and Robert Schumann, let me see your palms. Oh my God,
so hairy.
Oh my God, I see shaving.
Yeah, I get 5 o'clock shadow. David Mamet, I believe, said that there were 3 keys to success in storytelling, and that was, to an actor, show up on time, hit your mark, tell the truth. And so I think those things, and we've said that on this show a number of times. I think it was Jay Moore who told us that reference to begin with, and it's been our mantra this whole time. But I want to end our show on this point, because I think this is the most important thing that really embodies the torch that would be passed if this is a passing of a torch from literate classical
Quit trying to yank the torch out of Dr. Bob's hand.
No, I'm not yanking the torch.
It's sharing of the torch.
The reality is that
you've lighting more torches.
Exactly. It's like the Olympic torch. You've passed it by relighting and lighting it into a different type of music that, like you mentioned, Cole understands the chops of, and it is that. So I think that's the essence that everybody should get out of this show is the quality, the consistency, and again, show up on time, hit your mark, tell the truth. Pete?
Yeah, this is what I want to say. First, I'm going to say one thing to Cole, and then I want to ask you a question. I love what you're doing. Please keep doing it. You're doing the right thing. I know you know all those things, but I just have to tell you that because I only listen to so many podcasts because I have to do all the production stuff that we do for ours, and there's just only so many times. So the moment something from you comes out, it's on the docket, and I'm gonna listen to it, and that. If that doesn't resonate as being a big compliment, it's a really big compliment because my time is just so constricted. So I love what you're doing, and you're giving me a whole new form of music that I didn't really have the ability to understand. And because you teach it in the vein of Dr. Bob, it really makes it accessible to me. And if that works for me, there's a whole bunch of other middle-aged white dudes that want to know about Kendrick Lamar. Yeah. And so you've given us that.
He's teaching it as Cole Cuchna.
For sure. But
I learned from Joe Kermit.
For sure.
You know, I learned from Joe.
And so
we pass it on.
I was going to bring up Joe Kermit too. And then for you, I wanted to ask you this. If, this is like Leipzig back in the old days, or Prague, where, Mozart and Haydn get together, or, one of the Bachs is training, somebody else. What is that moment like here in Oakland where you have younger generation people doing similar things to what you do? What do you see?
I wish I could speak to it more intelligently, but because I live in my own little cloistered bubble, I can't speak to that. When I hear John talk about growing up in Vallejo and it being this hotbed, this right, like Vienna in the 1780s, with all this talent in one place, bouncing off each other, learning from each other, with this learning curve that's just almost vertical. That's very exciting, but unfortunately, that's not my world. So I can't speak to it. But one of the joys of the Bay Area, and I think that this is true, is that you have so many talented people living in one place, learning from each other all the time. So I can't speak specifically to what you're saying, but it's certainly going on.
What I'm saying is this. Let me try again, because I did a terrible job of explaining it. If Cole is Mozart and you're Haydn...
I want to be Mozart.
Yeah. Okay. If you're Mozart and Cole is Beethoven,
Beethoven.
If you're Beethoven, and I don't know who's next in line, but this is like one of those moments where you have two people that are doing incredible things that many years down the line can quite possibly be talked about. This could be one of those moments.
Oh, wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah.
It would be nice to feel that way. Listen, I just think it's great that you've created a vocabulary of genuine. And one of the things I asked Cole about before we started recording was, is there a book in this?
Yeah.
Where not just your techniques, but your ideas about what's going on. I mean, this is really important. Once you can document things and talk about them and learn to talk about them in a certain way, the influence you could have is tremendous. And much as I respect podcasts, until there's some kind of hard copy, it can't be. We distill stuff when we make hard copy. Yeah. We have to distill it and refine it and sharpen its edges so that everything is clear as it can possibly be. But this is as it should be, and this is how it's always been. Each generation makes its mark and then passes on to the next generation. What I think is wonderful is that you're creating a vocabulary based on art music that can now be used for any music, and it's for someone else to create a vocabulary for the music that turns them on the most. But I think this is special, and one of the things that makes it special is the ability to make a podcast. That didn't exist 15 years ago. Yep. 15 years ago, you had no way to spread this wisdom unless you were teaching in a classroom, and then the only people who got it were the kids sitting in front of you.
Yeah. And they barely wanted to be there a lot of times.
And they barely wanted to freaking be there, don't you know it? I mean, it's one reason why I left the conservatory.
And they just gotten their asses threatened by the 26-year-old bass drum player.
Yeah,
right. This is the furthering of human society, fellas. It really is, because I know I make jokes about it, but what's happening here is that Cole's ability to propagate this sentiment towards the enjoyment and the appreciation of the music is, to some degree, a result of opportunity and technology meeting. Mm-hmm. So here we are. We're right here at the precipice of being able to plant a seed in listeners that they didn't necessarily have access to before, and we don't know what we're going to inspire. So I wanted to thank you both for coming on the show. As always, Dr. Bob, thank you for plying us with martinis and charcuterie.
My greatest pleasure. And, the charcuterie is yours, my friend.
Yes. And Cole, man, you were huge admirers. Keep up the good work. We're looking forward to whatever it is you churn out in the 3 times pace that you're able to keep up now as compared to before. As you know, I just am concluding my career as a private investigator. But I'll tell you, the first 2 seasons of Dissect, I would spend on active stakeouts. I'm watching a window and waiting for something good to happen while I'm hearing about Kendrick Lamar.
That's so interesting. Yeah, it's cool.
It is really cool. So anyway, thank you both. Dissect Podcast on Spotify. Get it. Subscribe to it. Robert Greenberg Music. Be there. Consume everything. Music History Mondays. All of that stuff. I'm John LG69 on Twitter.
I'm at Pete A. Turner on Twitter right now, actually.
Right now. And we are both at Break It Down Show. So reach out to any and all of us. And I hope you guys reach out to our 2 guests today to get the education on music and appreciation of art and history that you all deserve to enhance your experience. Thanks, everybody. Thank you. Thank you, fellas.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.